Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Hare, Hare Hare Rama, Rama Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare
Hare Krishna devotees, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Welcome devotees to our morning Bhagavatam class. This morning we will be discussing from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 12, verse 24, and the chapter is entitled The Birth of Emperor Parikshit. And we are so happy to have His Grace Balabhadra Prabhu with us. We can be a little bit greedy for the next couple of months that we will get more of Balabhadra Prabhu's association because Hari Ashwa Prabhu is out of the country. So it's to our benefit that we get to hear from you, Prabhu. Thank you so much. And it's all yours, Prabhu.
All right, let's welcome back Mother Gita.
I'm so happy to see Mother Gita.
Haribol,
Always.
Haribol.
All glories to Prabhupada. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Hasodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Haribo 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 Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Paribraja Acharya Stotara Satashrishimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Nitilila Pravishta Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Paribraja Acharya Stotara Satashrishimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Se Kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shamakun Radhakun Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Navadvip Dham Ki Jai Mayapur Dham Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Neelachala Dham Ki Jai Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Maharani Ki Jai Shri Shri Gaurani Tai Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Sharat Bihari Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Madan Mohan Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Jamuna Mai Ganga Mai Ki Jai Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai Sankirtan Jagna Ki Jai Transcendental Book Distribution Ki Jai Go Premanandi Hari Hari Bo. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Guru Shri Guranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So reading Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, 12th chapter, text 24. Sarva Sadguna Mahatmye Desha Krishnam Anuvrata Ranti Deva Ivodaro Yatir Iva Dharmika Sarva Sadguna Mahatmye Desha Krishnam Anuvrata Ranti Deva Ivodaro Yatir Iva Dharmika Sarva Sadguna Mahatmye Esha Krishnam Anuvrata Ranti Deva Ivodaro Yayatir Iva Dharmika. Vishnu Guru.
Sarvasad Mahatmye Esha Krishnam Anuvrata Ranti Deva Ivodaro Yayatir Iva Dharmika.
सर्वसदगुणमहात्म्ये ईश कृष्णमनोव्रतः रन्ति देव इवोदारो ययातीव धार्मिकः
Sarvasatguna Mahatmye Esha Krishna Manuvrata Ranti Deva Ivodaro Yayatir Iva Dharmika. Hare Krishna.
Sarvasaguna Mahatmye Esha Krishnam Anuvatam Ranti Deva Evodaro Yayati Ivadamika. Hare Krishna.
Sarva Sadguna Mahatmye Esha Krishna Manuvata Ranti Deva Ivodaro Yayatir Iva Dharmika.
Hare Krishna. Okay. Word for word. Sarva Sadguna Mahatmye. Glorified by all godly attributes. Esha. This child. Krishnam. Like Lord Krishna. Anuvrata. A follower in his footsteps. Ranti Deva. Iva. Like. Udara. In the matter of magnanimity. Yayati. Iva. Like. Dharmika. Concerning religion. Translation purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. This child will be almost as good as Lord Shri Krishna by following in his footsteps. In magnanimity, he will become as great as King Rantideva, and in religion, he will be like Maharaj Yayati. Purport. The last instruction of Lord Shri Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita is that one should give up everything and should follow in the footsteps of the Lord alone. Less intelligent persons do not agree to this great instruction of the Lord, as ill luck would have it, but one who is actually intelligent catches up this sublime instruction and is immensely benefited. Foolish people do not know that association is the cause of acquiring qualities. Association with fire makes an object hot, even in the material sense. Therefore, association with the Supreme Personality of Godhead makes one qualified like the Lord. As we have discussed previously, one can achieve 78% of the godly qualities of the Lord's intimate association. To follow the instructions of the Lord is to associate with the Lord. The Lord is not a material object whose presence one has to feel for such association. The Lord is present everywhere and at all times. It is quite possible to have his association simply by following his instructions, because the Lord and his instruction and the Lord and his name, fame, attributes, and paraphernalia are all identical with him, being absolute knowledge. Maharaj Parikshit associated with the Lord even from the womb of his mother up to the last day of his valuable life, and thus he acquired all the essential good qualities of the Lord in all perfection. Rantideva, an ancient king prior to the Mahabharata period, referred to by Narada Muni while instructing Sanjaya, as mentioned in Mahabharata, Drona Parva 67. He was a great king, liberal for hospitality and distribution of foodstuff. Even Lord Sri Krishna praised his acts of charity and hospitality. He was blessed by the great Vishishta Muni for supplying him cold water, and thus he achieved the heavenly planet. He used to supply fruits, roots, and leaves to the rishis, and thus he was blessed by them with fulfillment of his desires. Although a Kshatriya by birth, he never ate flesh in his life. He was especially hospitable to Vashishta Muni, and by his blessings only he attained the higher planetary residence. He is one of those pious kings whose names are remembered in the morning and evening. Yayati, the great emperor of the world and the original forefather of all great nations of the world who belong to the Aryan and Indo-European stock. He is the son of Maharaj Nahusha, and he became the emperor of the world due to his elder brothers becoming a great and liberated saintly mystic. He ruled over the world for several thousands of years and performed many sacrifices and pious activities recorded in history. Although his early youth was very lustful and full of romantic stories, he fell in love with Devayani, the most beloved daughter of Sukracharya. Devayani wished to marry him, but at first he refused to accept her because of her being a daughter of a Brahmana. According to Shastras, a Brahmana could marry the daughter of a Brahmana. They were very much cautious about Varna Sankara population in the world. Sukracharya amended this law. Let's see, did I read that correctly? Yes. Sukracharya amended this law of forbidden marriage and induced Emperor Yayati to accept Devayani. Devayani had a girlfriend named Sarmishta, who also fell in love with the emperor and thus went with her friend Devayani. Sukracharya forbade Emperor Yayati to call Sarmishta into his bedroom, but Yayati could not strictly follow his instruction. He secretly married Sarmishta also and begot sons by her. When this was known by Devayani, she went to her father and lodged a complaint. Yayati was much attached to Devayani, and when he went to his father-in-law's place to call her, Sukracharya was angry with him and cursed him to become impotent. Yayati begged his father-in-law to withdraw his curse, but the sage asked Yayati to ask youthfulness from his sons and let them become old as the condition of his becoming potent. He had 5 sons, 2 from Devayani and 3 from Sarmishta. From his 5 sons, namely 1, Yadu, 2, Purvasu, 3, Dhruyu, 4, Anu, and 5, Puru. 5 famous dynasties, namely 1, the Yadu dynasty, 2, the Yavana Turk dynasty, 3, the Bhoja dynasty, 4, the Mleccha dynasty, Greek, and 5, the Paurava dynasty, all emanated to spread all over the world. He reached the heavenly planets by dint of his pious acts, but he fell down from there because of his self-advertisement and criticizing other great souls. After his fall, his daughter and grandson bestowed upon him their accumulated virtues. And by the help of his grandson and friend, Shibi, he was again promoted to the heavenly kingdom, becoming one of the assembly members of Yamaraj, with whom he is staying as a devotee. He performed more than 1,000 different sacrifices, gave in charity very liberally, and was a very influential king. His majestic power was felt all over the world. His youngest son agreed to award him his youthfulness when he was troubled with lustful desires, even for 1,000 years. Finally, He became detached from worldly life and returned the youthfulness again to his son, Puru. He wanted to hand over the kingdom to Puru, but his noblemen and the subjects did not agree. But when he explained to his subjects the greatness of Puru, they agreed to accept Puru as the king. And thus Emperor Yayati retired from family life and left home for the forest. Om Agyanati Mirandasa Janan Janan Salakaya Chakshu Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruvei Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale. Swayam Rupa Gadatmayam Dadati Swabhadantikam. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So thank you all for being here, especially I think Gita may be calling from India, so very valiant effort. So this is a very extensive purport, many possible subjects to be discussed, but couldn't do justice to each and every one of the aspects of this purport. So I chose to focus on a part that fascinated me, slightly confused me, and encouraged me on many levels. And I hope it does the same for you. And the aspect here is mentioned in the first part of the purport, because the second part talks about these great personalities, and Srila Prabhupada very nicely elaborates on who they are from the Mahabharata and different pastimes. So I won't go there so much. But in the first part of the purport, Srila Prabhupada says, first thing, the last instruction of Lord Shri Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita is that one should give up everything and should follow in the footsteps of the Lord alone. So we know Sarvadharma Parichaja Mamekam Saranam Braja Ham Tvam Sarvapapebhyo Moksha Shami Masucha. So Krishna is asking Arjuna to give up all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. Follow my instructions. So Prabhupada says less intelligent persons do not agree to this great instruction of the Lord, as ill luck would have it. But one who is actually intelligent catches up this sublime instruction and is immensely benefited. So this intelligence, which is a blessing of the Lord, and it is the form direction of the Paramatma, which I'll share something with you from the second canto regarding that the Lord is doing everything he can to guide us in our struggle for existence by way of the intelligence. So the intelligence is developed by association, which is the main point in this particular part of the purport. Srila Prabhupada talks about the association of the Lord. And obviously, if we associate with the Lord, as in any type of association, in the mundane world, people associate. Srila Prabhupada mentioned in one place how businessmen come together in an association to try to enhance their business endeavors. They go to the person who's making more money and they try to find how that person did it, or they do something called benchmarking, where they try to emulate or imitate someone else's success. So by association, and generally they say you are the sum total of whoever you've been associating with in life, whether it's a good crowd or a bad crowd, intelligent crowd or ignorant crowd, you start to reflect that, although the spirit soul is absolutely separate from that. It's not like this soul is intelligent, that soul is ignorant. All souls are intelligent, right? We all have intelligence as spiritual beings. We have eternality, bliss, and knowledge. We're eternal, full of knowledge, full of bliss. So the only, when you say different levels, that means the material conception of life. So by associating with those in the material conception of life, the bewildered spirit soul becomes confused about who he actually is. So if you can imagine associating with the Lord, so how do we put that into context so we can get a grasp of that? Because as we will discuss here, the Lord is not easily understood, even by the devotees. not easily understood. So in the mundane world, people choose their association. Sometimes they choose carefully, sometimes not. But by that long-term association in a particular environment or with particular persons, we begin to reflect that. It's like when I joined the movement in the mid 70s, and I came from a particular environment, which I tried my best to emulate all the persons within that environment, the musicians, the entertainers, and the cool people, and all the hippies and all that. And I started to reflect that in my activity. I reflected in the way I spoke. I reflected in the way I walked, in the food that I ate, the clothes that I wear. Everything reflected my association. Then, when I became a devotee or got involved in Krishna consciousness, everything about me changed. The way I spoke, like I tell people all the time, when I hear someone use profanities, I get very upset because as a young man, I was expert in using profanities. Okay. I know how to use those words. So especially if I hear a devotee say any of those words, I'm very upset. Okay, because it just doesn't fit well with us. Because since the time I joined this movement in October, actually before I joined, when I started coming to the temple, I stopped using those words because I was associating with devotees. And devotees didn't use those words. So there was no need for me to use those words to impress the devotees, like I'm so this, I'm cool, I'm this and that. I didn't have to do that anymore, which was a great relief. It was a great burden taken off of me, not having to live up to the kind of association I had before. Now I try to live up to the association of devotees. I remember meeting His Holiness Vishnu John Swami, and he impressed me so much by his character, by his speech, the sweetness of his voice, the loving reciprocation with devotees, the way he chanted kirtans and bhajans. I wanted to be like that. I had not met Srila Prabhupada at that point. I wanted to be like Vishnu John Maharaj. And a lot of times people say, you have that singing style like Vishnu John Maharaj, or you play harmonium like Vishnu John. Yeah, because I was trying to emulate, follow his example, and loving devotees. One time he said in a Bhagavatam class in Atlanta, he said, we should make a garland of Jiva souls and offer to Srila Prabhupada. I said, wow, that's so beautiful. Such a wonderful way to think. So my thinking started to change because of association. Many, many devotees have influenced my life, trying to pick up that association. So Krishna's telling us, you can associate with me. So just imagine associating, if you're a businessman with a very successful businessman. Wow, you can learn so much. Or a musician, like I associated with many different musicians in my past, and picked up so many different skills from them. Even today, when I study, like I still study music and things like that, I'm trying to pick up those influences, jazz, rock, whatever it might be. It's a practical thing. So in Krishna consciousness, this is really practical. But Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, doesn't reveal himself to those who are not devoted, those who are not austere, those who are not surrendered. But we still can associate with him. So as I was meditating on this part of the purport, it came into my mind about the idea of seeing Krishna or seeing God everywhere. But the problem there is that seeing God everywhere, if we're not careful, then it could become what Srila Prabhupada described, I believe he said pantheism, seeing God in everything. So we have to see that distinction. I actually had a reference to that. See if I can pull it up real quick. Yes. He says, pantheism in its higher status does not permit the student to form an impersonal conception of the absolute truth, but it extends the conception of the absolute truth into the field of the so-called material energy. Everything created by the material energy can be dovetailed with the absolute by an attitude of service, which is the essential part of living energy. The pure devotee of the Lord knows the art of converting everything into spiritual existence by this service attitude. And only in that devotional way can the theory of pantheism be perfected, In other words, the deficient aspect of it is seeing God everywhere, diffusing him so he's no longer a person. It's just his energy. I feel God's presence, or God is love. You know, people always say that God is love, and they think they've achieved the highest pinnacle of self-realization or whatever. God is love. But is God a person? So the difference of seeing God everywhere for the devotee and the person who's practicing like the pantheistic view of life or trying to meditate and not having any form or any idea what they're meditating on, there's a major difference. And that's really the point of what I wanted to open the discussion for eventually. There's a major difference. Seeing Krishna everywhere does not diminish his personal existence. Not that Krishna's everywhere, so he's nothing. He's just energy. Krishna's the person. So then when we say we're associating with Krishna, we're associating with the personality of Godhead, which is what Srila Prabhupada mentions in his purport, where he says, association with fire makes an object hot, even in the material sense. Therefore, association with the Supreme Personality of Godhead makes one qualified like the Lord. So then he mentioned about the percentage of the attributes that we can have of the Lord. So by associating with him. So when we're associating with him, Supreme Personality of Godhead, how special is that? But we have to stop and think about it because it slips out of our mind throughout the day. That is so easy to associate with Krishna. You just say Hare Krishna, you're with Krishna. Immediately, boom, you're with Krishna. So I was thinking about this over the last couple of weeks about the idea of an inner dialogue, having this inner dialogue with the Lord all throughout the day. Because in our mind, we're thinking all kinds of things and we're having a dialogue in our mind constantly about something we want, something we're trying to do, something we don't like, or someone we don't like. And all these things are going on in our mind. The mind is a repository of all that business, thinking, feeling, and willing. So then we can use that same energy to have a constant conversation with so-called with ourselves about the Lord or about the philosophy, Krishna consciousness. And we can start thinking in that way before we act. It's like Vishnu Gadar Prabhu in his Vyasa Puja offering this year when he mentioned about what would Prabhupada do? Like they say, what would Jesus Christ do? And we say, what would Srila Prabhupada do in this circumstance? So you get that inner dialogue going. But in order to have that inner dialogue going properly, you need to put something in there, into your thinking. That's the practical thinking, feeling, willing. So we study the books, not to quote unquote master the philosophy, because you can't. We may try to master this philosophy like we tried to master, subjects in school and we took tests and all that, good grades, diplomas, PhDs, and all that good stuff. But Krishna consciousness is different. You can't master it. You can practice it, sadhana bhakti, and you can realize by the mercy of the Lord, the Dadami Buddhi Yogam, he gives us the understanding how to come to him. By his association, by his mercy, we can begin to understand. So we keep that inner meditation going. That is meditation. Meditation doesn't mean meditating on the void, or meditating on some nameless concept of life. Someone was telling me the other day that their husband is not interested necessarily in Krishna consciousness, but he likes to meditate. And the person was saying, but I don't know what he's meditating on because he's not meditating on Krishna. So that but this idea that meditating on God as the all-pervasive is a beginning point. It's a starting point. But then the real point is God is a person, and you can converse with that person. How is that possible? God's in heaven. God's in another universe. God's in Vaikuntha. He's in Krishna Loka. Yes, but he's also in your heart. He's in everyone's heart. So in Bhagavad Gita, 1861, I believe, Ishwara Sarva Bhutanam, Rideshe Arjuna Tistati, Brahmayan Sarva Bhutani, Yantra Rudrani Maya. The Supreme Lord is situated in everyone's heart, O Arjun, and is directing the wanderings of all living entities who are seated on a machine made of material energy. So he's in everyone's heart. So if he's in our heart, how close is that? I mean, your cousin, your uncle, your relatives who live in another part of the world, they're not that close to you. You can call them on the phone, you can text them, you can FaceTime, but Krishna's in your heart, right there. So I want the association of this person, of that person. So I have to go through all this arrangement to get that association. I have to go somewhere, I have to do something. Think about that for a second. Krishna's right there immediately. Like Prabhupada says, when you say Hare Krishna, the Lord is dancing on your tongue. How, as they say in the mundane world, how cool is that? That's really cool. Hare Krishna. And I always tell that story that I gave a talk at the Philadelphia Rath Yatra a few years ago, and devotees asked me to speak in this tent about chanting Hare Krishna. And there's like 40 or 50 brand new people, never been to a temple, first time meeting devotees. And I was like, wow, how am I going to talk to them? So I mentioned and explained the holy name. I said, it says that when you chant Hare Krishna, the Lord is dancing on your tongue. I just let it float in the atmosphere, let them think about that, shake up their brains. The next day at the temple, I was giving the Sunday lecture after Rath Yatra, and a young lady who was in that meeting came to the temple. She said, you said yesterday at the park that when I say Hare Krishna, God is dancing on my tongue. I had to come and hear some more about that. I was like, wow, she actually heard. And it really set off something in her brain that I can be that close to God, because in the church, they tell me God is in heaven. God is over here. God is over there. You're telling me God is right here when I say Hare Krishna? Yes. So you have to think about that. And I always put it in context. If, for those who are from India, if Narendra Modi were to come to your home, even unannounced. Now, two things about that. If you don't know who he is, you think he's just a salesman. Who is this guy knocking on my door? Is it a UPS man or mailman? Who is it? Maybe he's a thief. I don't know who he is. And then someone says, but that's Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India. Wow, I didn't know that. Then your whole attitude would change. Am I correct? Yes, of course. Even if you don't agree with the politics of the person. Or more immediate example, King Charles? I forget his name right now. King Charles III, the new King of England. My God, if he came to your home, my God, you would just freak out to receive. You would prepare. If they gave you a week's notice, you would go nuts. You'd renovate your house. You bring in a special chef to please that person because you know who he is. Krishna's with us every second. What is the deal with me? With me. I'm not talking about you. With me. What is my problem? My problem? Prakriti kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasaha ahankar vimuradma kartahamiti manite. I am bewildered. I'm a bewildered soul, and I'm thinking I am the doer, which makes it difficult for me to realize that Krishna is the doer. So this whole process of associating with him, getting his qualities, 78% of those qualities to a limited degree, and it's natural. It's like Prabhupada said, fire, if you put something with the fire, it becomes hot. If you stay in the association of Krishna, you become hot like Krishna. That's why Krishna's saying, just surrender to me. Stop all this nonsense. Just surrender to me. Stick with me. Stay with me. And besides that, Arjun, because that verse I just read from Bhagavad Gita is verse 61, and we know 1866 is when he tells him, just surrender. So he's telling him, I'm with you. I'm with every living being. Just surrender. In fact, you don't have a choice anyway, because you're not the doer. You think yourself to be the doer, but you're not. So you might as well accept the fact that you're not the doer. I wish I had time to read this purport from the second canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's really long, but it has a statement there that really has stuck with me over the years. And I first heard this explained by Radha Mohan Das, who was our head brahmachari in Atlanta in the 70s. And he taught us this purport. I mean taught this purport. In Bhagavatam, second canto, second chapter, text 35. When I say taught, he went through it scrutinizingly. And the interesting parts of this purport, like Prabhupada says in the second part of the purport, because it's like an understanding of the super soul's presence. So listen to what Prabhupada says. At this point in our investigation, that's the way he phrases this purport. It's like investigating the concept. So the verse is, I'll skip the Sanskrit. The personality of Godhead, Lord Shri Krishna, is in every living being along with the individual soul. And this fact is perceived and hypothesized in our acts of seeing and taking help from the intelligence. Now, first of all, when I saw that word hypothesize, I had never even said that word or even heard that word in my life. I said, wow, that's heavy. So the purport says, the general argument of the common man is that since the Lord is not visible to our eyes, how can one either surrender unto him or render transcendental loving service unto him? To such a common man, here is a practical suggestion given by Srila Sukadeva Goswami as to how one can perceive the Lord, Supreme Lord, by reason and perception. So that's how Radha Mohan taught it to us. He said, this is how you can see the Lord. You study this very carefully. You can't see Krishna in his transcendental bluish form dancing with Radharani and the gopis and playing with the cowherd boys, but he said you can see him through this process. Actually, the Lord is not perceivable by our present materialized senses. But when one is convinced of the presence of the Lord by practical service, a practical service attitude, there's a revelation by the Lord's mercy. And such a pure devotee of the Lord can perceive the Lord's presence always and everywhere. So that's the point. Practical service attitude. What is that? Bhajitam Priti Purvakam. Right? Bhajitam Priti Purvakam. Serving with love. That's practical. We know how to do that. We know how to serve with love, and we know how to serve enviously. We know how to serve hatefully. We know how to serve begrudgingly. We know how to, if we love someone, how to serve them. Like Mataji is how you love your children and you raise them so carefully with so much love, and it's selfless because you're not expecting anything back. You're just giving, giving, giving. So that practical service attitude, that's not hard to understand, right? That's easy to understand. Practical service attitude. And then there's a revelation by the Lord. That's a little more difficult to comprehend, but that's the reality. Krishna reveals to us. And such a pure devotee of the Lord can perceive the Lord's presence always and everywhere. So if we want to perceive the Lord in the proper way, not in the pantheistic way, not in the limited way, but in the real, true way, it just requires practical service. Leave the rest to Krishna. You do your part, or we do our part. Leave the rest to Krishna. He will do the rest. He will give us the understanding. He will reveal himself in different ways. Now, this is the part when I heard it, it really blew my mind. He can perceive that intelligence is the form direction of the Paramatma, plenary portion of the personality of Godhead. To this day, I'm still trying to truly understand that. And I hope some of you can help me with that. The intelligence is the form direction of the Paramatma. What does that mean? I generally frame it by saying, it's like a radio thing, like there's this form and the sound goes through it and it comes out the other end. But is that really it? I'm trying to understand. I think I have a little bit of understanding, but I know he's using the intelligence to guide us, right? Sarvasya chaham ridi shani visto, matas matir ganam apohanam cha, vedaishta sarvaham eva veja, vedantakrit veda vedevacha. I'm situated in everyone's heart, and from me comes knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. So the Lord is doing it, but he's doing it through the intelligence. So I remember in Vishnu, I think once we maybe brought this up in a class, or maybe we were just talking about it, but there was that instance where Srila Prabhupada was being interviewed, and I'll depend on you, Vishnu Gadar, to explain a little bit better, but he was being interviewed, and I believe it was Romeshwar at that time, was trying to explain to the interviewer what Prabhupada meant about Krishna speaking to the devotee. And he tried to put it in this context that Krishna speaks through the intelligence for the devotee. And then Prabhupada said, no, for the pure devotee, he speaks directly, not through the intelligence. directly. It's like I'm speaking to you all right now. Krishna speaks directly to the pure devotee. For us, and for all conditioned souls, he speaks through the intelligence. He guides us through the intelligence. So that was my understanding of that. And as I said, maybe Vishnu Gadar can explain that pastime a little bit more. So the main point for me is that realizing that Krishna is with me, with us, all the time. We can speak with him. He's already there. We don't have to go anywhere. And that's not saying that you don't have to go to the temple, you don't have to go to Rath Yatra, because I'm coming to Rath Yatra. I'm so excited to see all the devotees at Rath Yatra. But really don't have to go anywhere to be with Krishna. He's already here. He's with me at every step of the way. My problem is I keep forgetting. So I practice this inner dialogue throughout the day, reminding myself. I learned that back in my Sankirtan days, because we did that a lot. Stay out of Maya. We kept this kind of inner dialogue going about the morning program, what the deities were wearing, the earrings, the this, the that, whatever. We just like thought about the morning program throughout the day. Then we would come together and talk about it just to remind ourselves. So this being able to remind yourself, and it's on you, it's on us. Don't put it on someone else. Okay, if someone reminds you of Krishna, that's fantastic, because a devotee is supposed to remind others of Krishna. But the work has to be internal on our part individually. And to prepare ourselves to be able to remember Krishna all day, we know what we have to do. Chant Hare Krishna in the morning as much as we can, as attentively as we can. My temple president during that time, Balavanta Prabhu, told me something very significant once. Not me, actually, was in a class. He said, if you can chant one round, just one of the 16 rounds, and hear every single syllable of every mantra, you will not have a disturbance during the day. What to speak of 16? Now, we all know how difficult it is to chant 16 rounds and to hear every single syllable mantra, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare. I mean, I've lost half of you already. It's like, I heard the first part. But if you do it nicely, then remembering Krishna happens automatically by the grace of the Lord. So that's my understanding of the first part of this purport, about the association of the Lord, gaining his qualities. And of course, the purport, the verse itself is saying this child will be almost as good. So he's saying how the child will reflect the qualities of these great personalities. It doesn't say he's associating with them, but he's reflecting those qualities. But we have the amazing opportunity to associate with the Lord. That's only by his kindness that he's given us this amazing opportunity. He's already there. It's not like we have the Lord, no one else does. He's in every atom. He's in the heart of every insect, animal, whatever, human being, good or bad. But we have the amazing facility given to us by Srila Prabhupada to think of the Lord in a personal way, to actually think that I can actually speak to the Lord right now. Yes, he's right there. What are you talking about? He's right there with you. It's like I'm speaking to all of you from a distance, but he's right here with me, with you. But to keep that meditation going throughout the day, we have to chant nicely in the morning. Use the morning time, the Brahma Muhurta, whatever time you get up. Use this time wisely. Don't waste it. Even if you can't chant all your 16 rounds in the morning, so be it. Sometimes you have to go to work, got to take kids to school. But whenever you chant nicely. That instruction I heard from a very senior Vaishnava. In fact, it was Hridayananda Das Goswami instructing Ramanath Sukha Prabhu from Atlanta, who was so much struggling. He was the head pujari and the head cook at the same time, okay, with 2 full sets of deities. He had to dress them, bathe them, cook for them, because we had lost a lot of our devotees that left. So he was totally stressed out. He said, Maharaj, I don't know what to do. I'm just running in the morning, waking the deities, dressing the deities, cooking for them. I can't chant my rounds in the morning. And Maharaj looked at him and said, Prabhu, I understand. And he explained to him about how they did in the library party. They had to go early in the morning to the university, so they had to chant 3 Gayatris later in the day. It was a big deal. So he said, Prabhu, whenever you chant nicely. Think about that for a second. Whenever you chant, morning, afternoon, whenever you chant nicely. it reminds me of another instruction. I'll give this last little story, but when I met, oh my God, my brain just went dead. Achutananda at that time, Achutananda Swami. He was one of my heroes in Kirtan. So I met him in Mayapur in 1976. I had a private little darshan with him. I said, Maharaj, very humble, Maharaj, what's the secret to doing nice Kirtan? He looked at me with disgust. He said, secret? What secret? Chant nicely for Krishna. That's the secret for Kirtan. Not to, get the devotees all fired up and this, all that stuff is part of it. But the real point of Kirtan is to chant nicely for Krishna. Please him, he's right there. In fact, he's right there in his holy name. So like that's my meditation on this today, is that the Lord is already with us. I just need to elevate my thinking to realize he's with me. And by reading Srila Prabhupada's books, I get more understanding of Krishna's greatness, his glory, his presence. And by chanting the holy names, Kirtan and Sankirtan, Lord Chaitanya tells us we can purify and get rid of all the dust, the mirror of the mind. And we can one day Krishna will reveal himself directly to us by his grace. So I'll stop with that. See if anyone has a question or a comment.
Thank you so much, Prabhu, for such a wonderful class. It is really, at least for me, it's really making me think deeper and deeper and deeper, and really making me reflect more and more and more. Such a meditative class. And especially I like the part when you shared about what Srinanda Maharaj said. Whenever we chant nicely, because sometimes during the day we have, family obligations, work and that, but at least the morning rounds, whatever we can put in, we should do our very best. That was such a wonderful, reflective thought from me. Thank you so much for sharing that. That somehow I was just getting goosebumps when you were mentioning and sharing. That was really, really powerful. Thank you.
Thank you.
We would like to ask devotees if any questions, any comments, any takeaways, a clarification to please do jump in, or you can raise your hand. Prabhu, I would like to ask the question that you asked or you requested Vishwagata Prabhu to speak about.
Yes.
If Vishwagata Prabhu can shed some light, I would love to hear it. When you both are on, it's power. That's why I look forward to both of your classes. It's like power. Prabhu, can you shed some light on what Balabhadra Prabhu was asking about what your Prabhupada said?
Sure. Hare Krishna.
Hare Bo Prabhu. Can't wait to see you. Can't wait to dance with you in Kirtan.
So that was that interview occurred in the 55th Street Temple in New York on the 11th floor. And it was the reporter there was from Newsday magazine. And you can read it. It's transcribed in the database in 1976. I think it's in July of 1976. And you're right, Balabhadra Prabhu. He was the reporter was asking Srila Prabhupada how he decides who's going to be a temple president and things like that. And so Srila Prabhupada said, just as you mentioned, that Lord Krishna tells him. And then Rameshwar Maharaj at that time, he chimed in that, what we mean by that is the intelligence, the intelligence is Krishna gives the intelligence to choose which is the proper one, who's the proper person. And then Srila Prabhupada said, no, it's Krishna tells me. Krishna tells me. That's it. So that was
beautiful pastime.
Yeah, you can read it. It's very, very instructive to read that thing. There's a couple other comments.
Yes.
As you were talking about association, and we acquire the qualities, interests, habits, etc. of those we associate with, and Srila Prabhupada often emphasizes that. And also, there's the verse in the 2nd chapter of Bhagavad Gita where Lord Krishna is speaking to Arjuna, and he says, Dhyayato Vishayam Pumsam Sangasteshu Pajayate Sangat Sanjayate Kama Krodha Vijayate. So when one contemplates the objects of the senses, one develops attachment, some from attachment, Sangat Sanjayate Kama. From such attachment, lust arises. And Srila Prabhupada, in some lectures, he's commented that also is referring to the same principle that you're talking about, that just by association, you get your desires. Sangat Sanjayate Kama, by the people you associate with. I was listening to a lecture the other day where Prabhupada said just that. So similar as you're saying, that's how the principle works. So if you associate with people who are, you're in the wine tasting group, or the cigar aficionados, or the people who are enthusiastic about fishing or playing football or whatever it might be, that's how you get excited about those things. And Srila Prabhupada mentioned that when we chant Hare Krishna, chanting the holy name, one time he said we should try to feel the presence of Krishna. You've heard that before?
Yes.
You try to feel the presence of Krishna. But if you can't do that, just try to hear each syllable clearly and distinctly. That's along what you said. I had a comment about also. You were saying that as a devotee, you didn't curse. You stopped cursing, using profanity, right?
Yes.
And that's usually the rule. You don't hear people, devotee people, using the profanity too much. But when Lord Chaitanya agreed to take lunch at the house of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya and his wife were preparing all kinds of wonderful dishes. And Lord Chaitanya was saying, I can't eat all this. And no, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was encouraging him. He said, you eat 56 offerings every day, so this is just nothing. Anyway, so as he started to take the offerings and take prasadam, then the son-in-law Amoga looked in. You remember this?
Yeah, Moga, pastime of Moga, yeah.
Yeah, and he started to criticize Lord Chaitanya.
Excuse me.
So Sarvabhauma looked at him, and Amoga could see that he was irritated by his comments. So he ran, and Sarvabhauma ran after him with a stick. You remember this?
Yes.
And he started cursing at him. He didn't catch him, but he came back, and so I guess so Lord Chaitanya, you know what Lord Chaitanya did when he returned?
What's that?
He was laughing. So in some rare instances in the service of Krishna, it might be okay. But I agree with you in general. But in certain rare instances, it might be okay to use cursing in the service of Krishna, or to chastise the miscreant, in this case. So Amoga then got cholera, and Lord Chaitanya then came to him, and so it was a whole thing. A comment. I know that you didn't focus on the latter part of this. This purport, but Srila Prabhupada mentions in the part about Yayati that he became elevated to be a devotee of Yamaraj. Although in the ninth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, there's he is described as becoming an associate of the Supreme Lord after he gives up his propensity for sense gratification. So it seemed. How would you? How to
square that?
Yeah.
Well, I'm looking at the sentence where he says that, and help me understand it. So he's saying, after his fall, his daughter and grandson bestowed upon him their accumulated virtues, and by the help of his grandson and friend CB, he was again promoted to the heavenly kingdom, becoming one of this. So to me, I see two parts. becoming one of the assembly members of Yamaraj with whom he is staying as a devotee. So it doesn't appear to necessarily say as a devotee of Yamaraj,
Okay.
but as a devotee. Just like as a devotee, I might be working in this place or that place, staying here, staying there, as a devotee working in this particular environment. So that's the way I see it, that he's staying with Yamaraj as a devotee, but it didn't distinguish saying a devotee of Yamaraj or a devotee of Krishna. But you brought that up, that other point from beautiful reference that he is identified as a devotee of the Lord. So that's the way I would see it, if that makes
Okay.
sense.
Okay. Yeah. So sometimes you'll find that the Mahabharata and Srimad Bhagavatam are a little different in their
Mhm.
descriptions of the same
Pastime.
pastime. Yeah. So but that's a good point you pointed out. Yeah, I took it the other way. But yeah, good. But it says he became an associate of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and part of it, Srila Prabhupada mentions here that he's one of the kings that people remember in the morning and evening.
Mm.
I don't know if you've been remembering those kings in the morning and evening. I certainly haven't.
I'm remembering now.
Yeah. We read Srimad Bhagavatam and hear Srimad Bhagavatam, so that's insane. But I was thinking in another sense that, one reason we do this, we do the Prema Davani.
Mm.
So the Prema Davani, we're remembering all these important, not kings, but important devotees.
Yes.
So because just hearing their name and remembering them is purifying for us,
Absolutely.
Ganga Mai, Jamuna Mai, Tulsi Devi, Namacharya Haridas Thakur, all these. So hearing the names, especially morning and evening, is really a good system.
Beautiful. Well, I just want to add to that point that you were bringing up about, profanities. Okay, like I said, when I joined, I stopped. But there's one occasion when Balabhadra, and I've told this story several times. I'm sure Gita's heard it many times. That once in Vishnugadar, you stayed in Atlanta, so you know those three buildings. On the lower side was the Grihasta building where I stayed with my wife, and all the brahmacharinis, they stayed upstairs. I'm there kind of like their protector. So one night, it was around 11 o'clock at night, these young guys drove up, pulled right in front of that building and started throwing stones and bricks at the building, using bad words and causing such a disturbance. So I came out the door in my characteristic Benny Tillman from East Point mood. I put on that voice. I used the baddest, nastiest words I could remember. Really heavy. I'm talking like scary. And those guys jumped in the car. They drove off and went away. So the point of this story is that the Matajis, as you said about, Amoga and all that, the Matajis came, they were at the top windows cheering me. I'm using every bad word you can imagine, but I did it to protect them. Instead of beating those guys, or I didn't have a gun to shoot them, but I just wanted to scare them really bad. And the women were like, Jai Balabhadra Prabhu. I was like, wow. So that's an instance where I did use those words. Remembering Narada Muni telling the snake disciple, I told you not to bite anyone, but you can show your fangs. So I showed my fangs that night. I know how to do that if I need to do it to protect devotees, but I don't do it. So what I'm referring to is when devotees, because of so-called professional association in the worlds they work in, the Karmi association, where people use all those kinds of words, then I've heard devotees casually use those words sounding exactly like those environments that they work in and come from. So that's why you have to be careful when you're going out there. You have to suit yourself up in the morning. You have to, like I said, you got to have that toolbox in place. You got to have everything ready when you go out there in that society. Because if you're not careful, those influences will trump your devotional influences. Then you'll start reflecting those. If you're smart, you'll catch yourself and say, that was ridiculous. I shouldn't do that. But some people just go, some devotees, and I've heard it too many times. That's why I'm bringing it up. It's like a warning to all of us. Don't let this happen to you. Don't let those words become a casual part of your conversation. You hear them when you're in your work environment, school environment, but don't reflect that. It doesn't fit in the devotional environment unless as I gave the example of myself, and Vishnu Guru gave that beautiful example, sometimes the service of the Lord, we might revert to some of those things. Like a Kshatriya has to fight. Okay, he has to be angry and fight. But at the same time, he has to be a devotee. So anyway, thank you,
Thank
Vishnu
you
Guru
so
Prabhu.
much. Yes, Prabhu, please go ahead, Vishagata Prabhu.
Oh, I don't have anything else. Those were
Oh.
the things, those were my points.
It was really, really nice to hear that discussion and shedding more light on both your points. Thank you so much. Xavier, I think you had your hand up. You had a question, Prabhu?
Hare Krishna, Xavier.
Hare Krishna, please accept my humble obeisances. All glory.
All glory to Prabhupada.
Yeah, I mean, you were just talking about anger, and it kind of relates to what was being said at the mantra retreat in relation to the lower self and the higher self. And could you, and they were talking about how like anger in times of frustration, the higher self, like it's like a hand and the four fingers go up and the lower self takes over. So could you talk about how anger and our emotions play into how the Paramatma could affect, could influence our mind through the intelligence and stuff, and caution against anger in a sense?
Yeah. Well, Vishnu Guru, I'll let him address that because he just quoted the verses that relate to where anger comes from. Vishnu Guru, could you jump in on that?
Oh, you mean sanjayate,
Yeah,
kama
Yes.
krodha bijayate.
Yeah, by contemplating the objects of the senses and all that area. Yeah.
Yeah. So we, when our material desires are frustrated, whatever those material desires might be, they might be little ones or big ones, or however that anger arises, and so then that clouds our thoughts. Like we tend to forget about Krishna. We start to breathe heavily and stuff like that, and might do some crazy things. But we can use anger in Krishna service, which is a different thing. Srila Prabhupada would sometimes speak very strongly about certain things that seemed like he was angry or would get angry, but to rectify people, to put them on the right path of self-realization. Material anger, in the material world, people take classes on how to manage the anger.
Yes.
Just like you were saying that in the whoever you're associated with, you get their qualities. So in the world, there's so many ways people express their anger. Sometimes they take things and smash them. That's what they smash them, right? And that when you're angry, that's what you do. You take that's the culturally accepted thing, perhaps in their environment. So devotees, we can learn to, because part of our training is to learn to tolerate matra sparshastu kanteya shitoshna sukha dukkha da agama paino nityastang titikshasva bharata. So we can tolerate, learn to tolerate. So even though we're tolerating, we still might have the anger still built up into it or present. So in those cases, as you're saying, remembering Krishna, thinking of Krishna, taking a step back, and when you take a step back, not just to ball your fist up, but to remember who you are. You're the servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. How is it Krishna's put you in the situation? What are you going to learn from the situation? How does Krishna want you to act? Like you were saying, how would Srila Prabhupada want us to act in the situation? Those are some, standard kind of things that we hopefully can think about when we are faced with situations where, which happens throughout life for everybody. Our own apparently material desires are frustrated.
Yes. And just as a reference for you, Bhakta Xavier, you can, because Vishnu Guru is quoting from the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, text 62 and 63. And I always use this when I'm talking to the devotees about, anger and all that, because you can trace it back. And this is what the Bhagavad Gita says. So the verse he was quoting, Dayato Vishayan Pumsham, 62, chapter 2. While contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachment for them. And from such attachment, lust develops. And from lust, anger arises. From lust, anger arises. Then the next verse, Krodhat bhavati samoha, samohat smriti vibrama, smriti brahma Brahmsad Budinaso Budinasat Pranasati. From anger, complete delusion arises, and from delusion, bewilderment of memory. When memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost. And when intelligence is lost, one falls down again into the material pool. So that's a whole step-by-step process of losing our, you don't lose the intelligence, but it is still there. But that ability to have to communicate with the super soul is lost in the midst of all that anger. But you can trace anger back to contemplating the objects of the senses. In another place, Srila Prabhupada says the devotee is not subjected to material desires while contemplating the objects of the senses. Because when we see the material things, we try to see them in relationship to Krishna. So we're not subjected to material desires. But if we're not seeing it in relationship to Krishna, while contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachment. And from attachment, lust. And then from lust, anger. So Bhakta Xavier, that anger comes from lust, and that lust comes from attachment, and that attachment comes from contemplating. So it starts with that. How are we seeing the world? Do we see it as Krishna's energy, or do we see it as various opportunities for us to enjoy? That's where the problem is. When that enjoyment is frustrated, as it will be, no matter what it is you try to do, no matter how much money you get, no matter how many things you have, you will be frustrated because everything is temporary. Like Vishnu Vidar quoted that verse, Matra Sparshata Konteya, same thing, second chapter. So one should learn to learn to tolerate all this stuff that's going on in the world. And then when you see how you can use something for Krishna, that so-called lust is different. Prabhupada wanted a skyscraper building in New York. He finally got it, 55th Street, New York. He was so proud of that big building that he had. Finally, he had a tall building in New York. You can say Prabhupada was lusty for a building. He wanted that building for Krishna's pleasure. So it's okay to desire something for Krishna's pleasure, but for your own personal sense gratification, apart from the basic needs of life and whatever things you need for family, just be careful, because that anger comes from unsatisfied material desires. Can't blame it on anyone else. It's on us. Okay, Mataji, pass it back to you.
Did that help, Xavier? I'm sure it did.
Yeah, thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you. In fact, when Xavier was asking this question, Prabhu, I was remembering last night when we had our Bhagavad Gita circle, and Prakshit was reading, and it was chapter 16, verse 4, where Srila Prabhupada listed the demoniac natures. He was starting in it, and one of it he mentioned anger in the translation, and in the purport was a rude awakening to all of us that was on this small group. That he said that is the royal road to hell.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, royal road to hell. It sounded pretty scary. And one of it was anger. So I was thinking about that when you were answering the question for Xavier, yourself, and Vishakata Prabhu. Thank you so much. Any questions from devotees? Any thoughts? Any last minute reflection? Prabhu, as you were speaking about profanity, I remember two incidences. I grew up in a Christian family where I was never exposed to that Krishna's mercy. But unfortunately, when I was in my working field, when I was in America, when you work with people among themselves, they talk and they cuss. And the good thing is my coworkers know that I don't use that language, so they don't do that with me. But I hear them talking and they cuss among themselves. However, the little that I know of Krishna consciousness, the little limited knowledge, is by association, you kind of pick it up unknowingly. So what I started doing, Prabhu, is every time, and that seemed to help me. I just wanted to share what helped me a little bit, if I may, is when my coworkers would talk among themselves and they would cuss. And when I hear the profanity, I would literally chant the Mahamantra. Literally.
That's nice.
As a shield. Don't come in my head. And I literally found myself chanting the Mahamantra, the number of times they would use the profanity language. I said, geez, that was like almost one round right there.
That's interesting. So that cursing became a blessing because it makes you remember Krishna.
Yes, Prabhu, so it's big because when I say the Mahamantra, I'm telling Krishna, I don't want that to come to my mind,
Yes.
And that helped me. And when I was teaching Sunday school a few years ago, and sadly, some of, because kids, when they're in school, they unknowingly pick up the profanity. So I introduced this idea to the high school students in my class in Sunday school. And I told them, try it for a week, and try it for a week and see how many times you actually catch yourself. Prabhu, the very next Sunday school, they said, Mataji, I was chanting the Lord's name more than I could ever did in my life, because it was right at the tip of their tongue, because they're in that school association, So for me, that helped not to, pick up that language, is chanting. And I wanted to share that.
Oh, that's helpful to me. That's a very nice meditation. I'm going to share that with others. That's very powerful.
I hope that helped the Sunday school kids that I taught a few years ago, because it's kind of prominent in the schools, unfortunately, nowadays.
Yeah.
Pretty prominent. Yes. Thank you, Vishwagata Prabhu and Balabhadra, for such a wonderful class. As we always say, when you both come on, it's powerhouse. And we love the association and we love that discussion. And thank you to all the devotees for joining us. Vanchakapadivyascha, Kripasindavevacha, Patitanam Bhavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki.
Srila Prabhupada. Hari Bol, everybody.
Hari Bol. Hare Krishna devotees. Hari Bol. Thank you, Prabhu.
Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Shri
Thank you so
Prabhupada.
much.
Thank you, Mother Geeta.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Xavier.